it was 6 days until the wedding was gonna happen. And I was a pastor over in the Seattle area. And in between services on a Sunday, I had gone into like our break room, and one of the other pastors was in there, and a gal was talking with him. And she said, I'm getting married in 6 days. And we had changed our plans around a little bit. We're getting married in 6 days, but we don't have an officiant. Is there a pastor here that would be willing to marry us? And I'm overhearing their conversation, and I'm just thinking about my schedule. I'm like, well, and I said, I don't know her, but I'm like, hey, I'm free on Saturday. I'm a pastor here. I could marry you guys. And she's like, really, that would be so incredible. Let's make it happen. I'm like, all right, that's cool. And then we exchanged information. And I said, let's connect this week. We'll go through the details, make sure the whole service is outlined and all taken care of. And she said, fantastic. And she gave me a very specific restaurant that was in a very specific hotel in downtown Bellevue for us to meet at. And so Thursday came, and I showed up there, and I find the restaurant inside the hotel, and I see her in there, and her husband-to-be, he wasn't able to get off work and be there. And so she's like, it's just gonna be me, but we're gonna plan the details, and it's gonna be fine. He trusts me. We're gonna make it work. I'm like, awesome, cool. I'm flexible. We've got 2 days. We'll make this work, you know? And I said, hey, one question I have is, where is the ceremony gonna be? And she, from the restaurant, just points out into the lobby and up these stairs, and she's like, right there. And these stairs are incredible. Like, there's 2 sets of these winding staircases that go up both sides of the lobby, and they come together and they converge on this platform that overlooks this magnificent, like, beautiful lobby of the hotel. And it's a real swanky hotel in downtown Bellevue. And she says, we're gonna do it right there. I'm like, awesome. And she says, but you gotta know this. We haven't been invited, and we didn't reserve it. We're just gonna show up. And there's about 50 of us that will fit us. They can like stand up there, and we're gonna do it right there. It's gonna be awesome. And I'm just thinking in my head, this is a flash mob wedding. Like, this is incredible. This is awesome. Like, so I'm glad I get to be part of this. This is right up my alley. This sounds fun. And so I said, okay, let's do it. Let's make it happen. And so we worked through the details. We're sitting there again in a public restaurant at this long, like probably like a 30-foot long community table having lunch. There's people on both sides of us. We start going through the details of the wedding, the ceremony of what we're gonna do. And the reason why they had changed their plans is because she was a devout Catholic, like growing up. Her family is all Catholic, and they were supposed to get married a certain way, and then eventually her and her husband said, forget it, we're not gonna do the Catholic thing. We don't care about making mom happy or grandma happy. We're just gonna do it, we're gonna make us happy, and we're just gonna do it this way. And so that's why they had changed their plans, moved everything up, and they're gonna do this flash mob wedding. But she says, I still wanna honor like my grandparents and where I came from. And so I want some of the Catholic things to be in our wedding. She looks at me and she says, would you be willing to pray the rosary? Now again, I don't know a lot about Catholicism. And in that moment, she said, do you know it? And I said, honestly, I don't. What I didn't tell her is also in that moment, I realized for the first time that it was called the Rosary and not the Rosemary. And I didn't, and so I'm learning things as we go. I'm like, tell me more. She said, would you be willing to pray? I said, and do you know it? I said, I don't know it. I could read it, you know, I could learn it. And she said, well, do you think you could learn it? And would you be willing to sing it? And I'm like, what? You don't even know me, and you want me to sing, and you think I could? I can't sing at all. You don't want me singing, okay? And so she's like, that's okay. I could probably sing it in the ceremony. And then no joke, right there in this communal table with people on both sides of us, she looks at me straight in the eyes, and she just starts singing full volume this song, this prayer. And I thought she was gonna do like a little sample. No. She did the whole thing. I didn't know, am I supposed to look at her in the eyes? Like, I'm like, yeah, okay. And I started to look at the other people because they're looking at me too. Like, what is going on with these? Like, what is she singing? Like, and I don't know either because I've never heard it before. And it is so strange, the request. First, the flash mob wedding, then, you know, pray, sing the rosary. But Saturday came, and it was incredible. I mean, one of the coolest weddings I've ever done, and one of the coolest venues I've ever been in, and it was free. And not only was it free, but that just so happened that one of the local high schools was holding their prom there that day. And so that afternoon, the whole entire lobby down below this chandelier and staircases down below was full of people in formal attire. And when that bride kissed the groom, the whole lobby just erupted in applause and cheering for them. It was so cool. And then it got weird. And she asked me, I don't know them. And she said, hey, would you be willing to stay for the reception? Okay, that's a common request. You want to stay for the reception? They feel like they want to feed me. I did their way. And I'm like, I like food, okay. But she said, would you stay for the reception and would you evangelize to our guests? And if you're not familiar with what evangelize means, essentially it's to share your faith, to share the gospel, to share Jesus with them, try to get them saved. Like if they die when they drive home from the wedding that day, that they go up instead of down, right? Like would you evangelize them? And I was like, no. In my head, I said no. Outwardly, I said, yeah, okay, I'll stay. And I'm like, at least I get a free fancy meal out of it. And so I go into the fancy restaurant that's outside the lobby of the hotel, and I go into there, and then there's assigned seating. I'm seating with these people, and I'll tell you what, this became one of the coolest conversations I've ever had with people that centered around faith and real life and honesty. And so here's who's at the table with me. On my left side, I've got a couple, and they are atheists. One of them the wife had believed in God at one point, but now they don't. Neither of them believe in God, and it's just, everything's just the natural order of things. They're atheists. Across from me over here is this couple. They're devout Catholics. They're probably related to the bride, right? And they grew up Catholic. They grew up checking religious boxes, trying to make sure they do more good than bad to keep in right standing with God. And then right over here is this middle-aged man. He's Muslim, and he's got his child with him, maybe 12 or 13 years old, that's with them as well. And maybe it's just because of what I do. I officiated the wedding. They know I'm a pastor. But the conversation, I didn't start the conversation, just so you know. It was not on my agenda to evangelize, okay? I was there out of courtesy, and I'm going to get a free meal out of it. And they said, would you, so we start talking, and just spirituality and life, real stuff starts being spoken of. The atheist couple, they talk about how they have an adult son who's estranged, and he doesn't want anything to do with his dad. And he's been addicted to drugs for a number of years, and they don't even know where he is. And they're hopeless about this rift that's between them and their son. The devout Catholic couple, they lost a child at a young age, and they've always just mourned and grieved this. And they've always just wondered, is there something that they could have done better to make God happier with them, that they would have never lost that child? They check the religious boxes to say on the right side of the ledger. And then the Muslim man is there with his child, who again, 12 or 13 years old. And he just spoke so honestly and so openly, unfortunately for the sake of his kid, because his kid there, I thought his kid was a boy. It's his daughter who's transitioning to a boy at 12 or 13 years old. And he spoke so openly about his disappointment in his child. And I watched his child just sink in their chair in shame as dad just belittled them. We had a very honest and real conversation. This conversation turned to about this, suffering in the world and how do we reconcile it? How do we make sense of it? And so they say, okay, Tony, what do you think about this? You're a pastor. What do Christians, how do you reconcile all the suffering that we experience in the world? Is there a good God, really? How do you reconcile that? You're a Christian. And because we were having an honest conversation, I'm just going to extend that honest conversation to you today. And I said, honestly, I have a hard time with even you calling me a Christian. I have a hard time sometimes being underneath the umbrella of Christianity, because if you want to talk about suffering, you look at world history, a lot of suffering has happened at the hands of Christians. And I said, honestly, though, there's a different way that I've looked at this for a while now. And I said, I know by definition I'm a Christian, but what I really consider myself is just simply a follower of Jesus. Like, that's where I really rest in my faith as a follower of Jesus. Because, and I turned to the atheist guy, because I said, here's the thing, is that the situation that you're in with your son, you don't feel like you have any hope, because just the natural order of life is going to progress, and there's no cause to it. There's no deity. There's no one you can go to say, would you help with this? Like, you just kind of have to let the details play out. It's survival of the fittest. And he's like, yeah. And I looked to the Catholic couple, and I said, do you feel like they're closer to God the more right choices you make? Does you feel like that like solidifies your relationship with God? Does that actually give you the hope or help you mourn the loss of your and the answer is no. And in that moment I said, listen, religion is complicated. There's a lot of confusing parts to it. What's less complicated is Jesus. and what Jesus came to do. And Jesus gives us hope. And in that moment I said, Jesus gives us hope. That child that's just shrunk in their chair in shame looks up and makes eye contact with me for the first time in the entire conversation. Out of the entire conversation we had, the only part that was just sprinkled with hope was talking about Jesus. Talking about Jesus. And I'll tell you what, as much as I would love to say in that moment, as I shared Jesus with them, with no intention to evangelize, but still had a chance to authentically share parts of my faith, I would love to say that I asked for them to raise their hands and say a prayer and come forward, and we did an altar call right there at the wedding reception. That didn't happen. And the truth is, though, as I look at that conversation, these were a bunch of normal people holding different beliefs. We were all collected at the table together from different walks of life, and they just simply had different beliefs that they were holding on to. It's all faith. It's all faith. To believe there is no God, is still faith. And so we're just a bunch of normal people holding different beliefs. And you're here today in the room with us Easter Sunday, and I don't know what the beliefs are that you hold. I trust that there's a bunch of normal people here in the room. I know there's a few that are less than normal, but there's a bunch of normal people here, and we hold a bunch of different beliefs. And I don't know what brought you here. I don't know what you think about when you think about God. I don't know what brought you here. Maybe you're here today because you got an invite of a friend, or you found us online and you want to go to church for Easter. Maybe you're here because this is your church. Maybe you're here because grandma threatened that if you don't go to church today, you're not going to get ham afterwards, and you like ham, so here you are, right? I don't know why you're here. I don't know what the beliefs are that you hold, but here's what I want to talk about this morning. Here's what I got a chance to share at that table is I just want to talk about Jesus. Because the reason we celebrate Easter is because a man that was dead became alive again, and he resurrected. And that's what we put our faith in. That's what we trust in. That's what leads us to talk about Easter. Christianity started, when you try to think about how do you resonate like suffering in the world and the bad things that happen, Christianity started because a very, very good man was put to death for things that he never did. He was punished for things that he never did. And so you think about, why is there suffering? I don't know. And I don't know necessarily like the things that Jesus had to go through and the things that he did. I mean, Jesus was betrayed by his friends. Jesus was betrayed by family. Jesus was put on a cross, breathed his last breath at the hands of people that were supposed to be his enemies. He was placed inside of a tomb that was supposed to be his forever resting place. Only so that, and if you're here this morning, I trust that you probably know this part of the story. Because heck, we're in Spokane. It's 2026. There's enough faith background in our community that you probably know this part of the story, but Jesus is placed in a tomb. He's taken his last breath. His body has been covered up with a stone, and the story is over. For these first century believers, the ones that have put their faith and trust that Jesus could he be who he claimed to be? Now the story has come to an end, and it's ended abruptly, and it's ended in a way that they never thought it would end. And their faith gets diminished, and they're now without hope because the story's over. It was fun while it lasted, but roll the credits. It's not going any further. And again, this is the part of the story, though, that this is why we celebrate Easter, because then a few days later, when they came to check on the tomb, the stone had been rolled away and the tomb was empty. And for those who thought the story was over, really the story of the church is just beginning, because Jesus has created a movement that is still moving. And you might say, Tony, why do you believe this stuff? Tony, why would you believe this ancient book that's from this ancient world? And why? And I'll tell you, I can't try to convince you that God's real. And I'm not even convinced that God's real based on my own experiences with God or based on my experiences with other people that have experienced with God. But I believe it because never before in history has any human ever claimed to be God, lived the way that they lived, was killed for those claims, and then came back to talk about it. Never before and never since. I believe, like so many other people believe today, because of, like we believe this today, they believed it in the first century because of the resurrection of Jesus. If there's no resurrection, there is no church. And listen, I know that if you just want to pick at and point at parts of Christianity, there are so many things that have been debated for centuries, so many things that you can say are problematic as part of the faith. I get it. I'm not here trying to defend the Bible cover to cover. I'm just simply here to talk about Jesus and tell you the the reason we celebrate Easter is because a man, a good man, claimed to be God, was put to death for those claims, and yet he didn't stay dead. And our entire faith hinges on this one event. I don't believe in the resurrection I don't believe in Jesus because the Bible tells me to. I believe in it because of an event, of something that took place. So when I get up on a stage like this and on Easter Sunday, I actually really resonate with, in the early church, there was an influential leader. We call him the Apostle Paul. He wrote about 2/3 of the New Testament. And at one point, he's speaking to followers of Jesus, and he says to them, he reminds them of time that he was with them. And this is in 1 Corinthians. He says this, he's reminding them of this moment. He says, brothers and sisters, when I came to you, back when I was there with you in person, he says, I didn't come with the eloquence or human wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. Why is that important? Because if the crucifixion and the because it's the crucifixion and the resurrection that makes all of this believable. Again, I don't believe in this event because the Bible tells me to. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. I believe in it because of this handful of misfits, these unqualified men that followed Jesus and lived life with Jesus and saw the miracles that Jesus did, got to participate in miracles. And then those same men saw Jesus put to death on a cross and placed inside of a tomb. And them, along with hundreds of others, saw the one who was dead back to life. Saw the one who was dead with now back to life with the holes in his hands where the nails were pierced through them. They had breakfast with him a few days later on the beach. I believe because of the eyewitness accounts of Jesus that no other event in world history is documented as well and preserved in ancient literature like the resurrection and the life of Jesus. And so we believe in this because of the event of the resurrection. That's what birthed the church. That's what created. Without that, there's no Bible. Without that, that's what put all of this into motion. And so like Paul, I resonate with what he says when he says, when I came to you, guys, when I'm up here, I'm not up here saying I'm the most eloquent person, that I'm the most wise person, that I've got all my stuff together, that I've got all the right information. I'm just telling you that here's one thing I'm pretty confident in, and that's Jesus and Jesus crucified and resurrected on the third day. And I like how Paul continues in this verse where he says this. He says, I came to you in weakness with great fear and trembling. He says, my message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power. I remember one time when I was 17 years old and I had felt a call into ministry, that I wanted to be a pastor, that I wanted to help people find and follow Jesus, which that's what we're all about here at Mountain Church. We want to be a safe place for you, your friends, your family, your coworkers, your kids, your grandkids, your grandparents, whoever it would be. We want to be a safe place to consider the claims of Jesus and decide for yourself, what does that mean for your life? And we want to point people to Jesus so they can find him, and not just find him, but follow him for all the days of their life. And I remember being 17 years old, and I wanted to get a chance. I wanted to learn to preach. I wanted to learn to share. I wanted to learn to evangelize. And that summer, I was on a ministry tour where a group of us from Spokane, we traveled over to Detroit, and we went in inner city Detroit and around Detroit, and we spoke in churches. We were part of a choir. Again, I can't sing. I would lip sing, okay? It was before lip sync battles were a thing. I was up there lip syncing every word to every song because you don't want me to sing. But my friends were there, so I did the choir thing. We did some skits. We learned to kind of share our testimonies. We did ministry. We served in the communities, did a number of different things. And on this day, they said, Tony, we want you to share your story. We want you to share the gospel. And on this day, we were going to be in a men's detention center. And I got up there with some fear and trembling as I looked at the audience, and I'm like, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? I had prepared some things. Like if I get the chance to share, here's some things that I would share. I'd ask my youth pastor that was with me, I said, hey, what should I share? He's like, just give him hope, man. Just share Jesus. Share your story. Point him to Jesus. But I'm just thinking in my head, these are criminals. And that was scary to me. And in my mind, these are people that were there not because they wanted to be in this service. They were forced to be. They had nowhere else to go. It gives a whole new meaning to the phrase captive audience, okay? They were prisoners and had to be there. And I'm supposed to now share hope and share the message of Christ with them. I'm supposed to share, and I'm up on stage, and there's some fear, and there's some trembling. And while I had a plan, and I had some things I thought I would say, it's like when I got up on stage, God reoriented my thoughts and had something different for me to say. And I began to share with them, and I began to share with them the struggle that I had as a young kid growing up, and just this desire to have a dad in my life, desire to have a father in my life that was present with me. My friends had dads. They had dads at their baseball games and their family events and their dinner tables. I was lucky if my dad called me on my birthday. He wasn't around. I didn't know why, but he wasn't around. And the week before I left for this ministry trip, the same trip that now had me on stage in front of these prisoners, these inmates, the week before I had found out some news that just shook me, and I told no one because I was processing and I didn't know how to deal with it. What I found out was that my dad, who wasn't in my life, was moving. And that shook me because it's like, well, why does it matter? You don't have a relationship with anyways. What's it matter where he lives? Well, it matters to me. Because just because he wasn't in my life, the fact that I knew where he lived, it gave me a sense of access to my dad. Like if life ever got really hard, complicated, or there was crisis, at least I know where I could go and knock on a door and find my dad. Maybe one day if I ever did something that was like good enough, that would make him proud, graduate high school, graduate college, get married, something. Maybe there would be someday that if he could just find out he's still in town and that maybe he would actually show up into my life and be proud of me for something. Only all of that was about to change because he was going to move out of state and I didn't know where he would live. So how am I going to connect with him? How am I going to access him? And I start to look at the men that are in the audience. And I said, listen, this is how a lot of us feel when it comes to God. It feels like this because maybe you've lived in a way where you're like, I don't really believe in God, or maybe I kind of do, but he's like kind of out there. Like if I ever got crisis, if I ever really needed something, I know where I could go to find him, and maybe he would like help out with something. Maybe he'd show up and intervene somehow. But I don't really need him now, so I'm not going to worry about that now. It's like if he does exist, I kind of know, I know his address. I just don't want it. I don't have any relationship with him. And some of us, we are on the side of it. It's like, man, I don't know why my dad doesn't want a relationship with me. Did I do something? Did I not do something? Could I ever do something that would get him to pay attention to me? Could I ever actually do something that would make my dad proud? And some of us, this is how we think about when we think about God. We think about God almost like this angry God in the sky that is far less than proud of you. And you're thinking maybe, and I'm telling these guys, like you're thinking maybe you've done too much wrong that he could ever do enough right to make your Heavenly Father take notice. And I tell them, I just begin looking at eyes around the room and start just to see the value and the worth in every individual that's in the room and recognize they are co-image bearers just like I am. And I said, listen, some of us, this is how we think about when we think about God. And this is the way we view God. And somehow we have to measure up. Sometimes we have to make him proud in order for us to like us or want to be in relationship with us. But I'll tell you what, that's not what you see when you look at Jesus. And if you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. If you want to know what God is like, forget your upbringing. Forget the religion that you claim that you're part of. If you want to know what God is like, the best version that you could ever look at or point someone to is Jesus, who is the full revelation of God, who is the visible image of the invisible God. And I just share from my heart about the person of Jesus and gives us hope. And you're looking for hope and healing and purpose and passion in life. You turn your life to Jesus. And then at the end of the talk, I was able to say, if you want to make a decision of faith today, would you raise your hands? And eventually I said, would you stand up just to proudly be able to say, I'm making a decision of faith. So in my culture back then, we would do altar calls where people come to the front, but they kind of frowned on doing an altar call where hundreds of inmates might rush the stage. And so I just had them lift hands and I had them stand across the room, and there was a move of the Spirit of God in that room. Not with wise and persuasive words, but just convinced that Jesus lived and died and rose again. And he changes our lives. And he gives us a best and fullest picture of God. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to consider the same questions that I would have asked those inmates that day. On what do you do with Jesus? You might have your confusion about like, yeah, but I can't make sense of this. And your questions about Christianity, your questions about the Bible, but what do you do about Jesus. There's some of you who'd say, like, yeah, I'm following Jesus. I said a prayer once when I was a little kid, and I invited Jesus into my heart, and I'm good, I'm a Christian. But are you following Jesus? If you believe he is the creator and master of all things and the creator of the universe, and he stamped his image in you, you're like, yeah, I believe that, but are you following him? Is that shaping the way you think, the way that you love, the way that you live? Are you following Jesus? The story of Jesus, the message of Jesus is good news. It's got to be good news. The word gospel literally means good news. It's the good news story of Jesus. And if you've experienced a version of the gospel, or you've lived out a story, or you've been taught a version of the gospel, and if it didn't sound like good news to you, it probably wasn't the whole picture. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. If you're part of a church that shares the gospel with you, and it doesn't sound like good news for all people, but only for a select group of people, only for the in group of people, only for the people who've got their act together and all cleaned up, if the gospel doesn't sound like good news for all people, find a new church. Because the gospel is good news, not for some, but for all. There's an illustration of the gospel that's been around for a number of years, and I want to attempt to show it to you today. This illustration, it's called The Gospel in Chairs. Now, I've modified this a little bit. I've simplified it some, but essentially what I want to do is I want to show you the gospel, and I want to show it to you in a way that is just in a visual. And I'm going to walk through this gospel, through this visual, and I'm going to do this twice. And on the first time, I'm going to attempt to share just some of the basic understandings of the gospel, some of the things that you've probably heard repeated throughout life. If you've got faith background, church background, Christian background, these are things you're like, yeah, that's some of the stuff I've heard. And there's some beauty and there's some truth in this first demonstration. But at the same time, I think there's some things that get misinterpreted. And I think we can do a better job. I think we can do a more biblical job. And so I'm going to attempt to walk through this 2 different times. And on the second time, I'll make some adjustments to kind of just see if we can do better. So here it is, the gospel in chairs. In the beginning, God created. He creates the universe. He creates the heavens. He creates the earth and everything in them. And then God creates us. He creates his image bearers. He creates us in his likeness. And God, being love, he created us with the sole desire to be in face-to-face relationship with his image bearers. He created us to be in relationship with him. And God, being love, though, also understood that love has to have a choice. Love can't be forced. It's robotic. For it to be real love, someone has to choose it. They can't be forced into it. So he actually gave us freedom to choose. Freedom to choose to go our own way, or freedom to choose to be in intimate relationship with him. And we, in the very beginning, turned our back on God in the garden. And then we turned our back on God again with Cain and Abel. And from generation to generation, we continued to turn our back on God. And God is love, but God is also righteous and pure. And he is a wrathful judge. And God, in all his holiness and all his purity, he could not look upon our sin, and he turned his back on us. And so now we are underneath the condemnation of God. But God is not only a God of condemnation, he's also a good heavenly Father. And so at just the right time, God sent his Son to live with us, to become one of us, to take on our flesh and to become like us, and to show us what it meant to be a perfect human. And in the story unfolds, eventually it leads Jesus to the cross. And on that cross, he took upon our sin, and he took upon the full wrath of God. The same God who had to turn his back on him as he relinquishes his wrath on his Son. And in taking on God's wrath, he dies. And he's placed in a tomb. And then a few days later, he doesn't stay dead, but he rose again. And in rising again, he draws our hearts back to God. And also, he allows God to look back on favor with us, that we can be back in relationship with God through mercy. This is the gospel, round 1. Does it sound familiar? Are there some parts of it that you're like, yeah, that's what I've heard before. That's what I've been told before. Let's see if we can make some adjustments and do a little better. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He creates all things in the earth. And this God who is love also created humanity. He created humanity in his likeness and his image. And he creates humanity with the desire to be in right relationship, with the desire to be in face-to-face relationship with his image bearers. And because God is love and he desired love from us, he also made us agents of choice for us to be able to choose love. And it has to be a choice. It can't be forced. And so we have now the freedom to choose love or to choose to go about life our own way. We can choose to have intimate relationship with the Father, or we can say, no, we'll take it from here. And we chose to turn our backs on God in the garden with Adam and Eve. And then with Cain and Abel. And then from generation to generation, we continue to turn our back on God. And God, being a God of love, but also being a just, righteous, pure God, he chose to pursue us in the garden. He chose to pursue us when Cain killed his brother Abel and said, I'll protect you from the vengeance of other people. He chose to seek after the children of Israel. And still, yet, then we still said, nope. We'll do it our own way. And we turned our back on God again. And then God said, well, let me give you the law. Let me give you rules to help guide you and to lead you into righteousness. And he kept pursuing us. And we said, nope, we'd rather have the golden calf. We'll take it from here. And then God says, well, then I'll bring prophets that will help speak into your generations. And they'll lead you and they'll call you towards me. And we said, no. And then God said, then I'm going to show up and you're going to go into captivity. And it's not just to punish you, it's to help you grow and help you grow thirsty for me again. And we said no. And then God, over and over again, as we turned our back on him throughout the centuries, kept pursuing us. And we kept turning away from God until this God who is love and this God who is pure and this God who is holy says it's just the right time. And he sent his son to dwell among us, to take on our flesh, to be one of us. This heavenly Father now is dwelling with us through Jesus. Jesus showed us what it looked like to be a perfect human. Not since Adam had the world seen a perfect human, and he was remarkable. He showed us how to love. He showed us not just how to love God, but how to love ourselves, how to love our neighbors, how to even love our enemies. And while he spent his life trying to uproot religion, he also sought after those who thought they were so far from God's reach. And he welcomed them in and he pulled them close. It was after a conversation that he had with a woman at a well, a Samaritan woman, someone that his people should not associate with. It would make them unclean. And he's talking to her and she says, why are you talking to me? And he's like, I haven't come to judge you. I've come to reveal myself to you. At one point, he has this interaction with this guy named Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus is a tax collector. And he says, and in that culture, that was not okay. He was despised by his culture. And yet Jesus says, hey, let's hang out. I want to come to your house for a meal. And Jesus, he initiated relationship with acceptance, and that acceptance led to Zacchaeus' repentance. And then eventually Jesus has this conversation with this woman who's been caught in the act of adultery, and the accuser comes with rocks to stone her, and Jesus defends her against her accusers. And he says, neither do I condemn you, go and sin no more. I want you to notice the order of that. Neither do I condemn you, then go and sin no more. He front loads it with acceptance. And notice he doesn't say, neither do I condemn you, go and sin no more, or else then I'm really going to get you. Jesus continually, he initiates relationship with acceptance, and then forgiveness just flows out of his life. And we didn't know what to do with it. We didn't know how to respond. And it felt like a threat to our religious institutions that were predicated on this eternal insecurity between us and God and where we stand with God. And so ultimately it led to us putting Jesus on the cross, releasing our wrath on him as the Father looks on with love and reconciliation. And Jesus is crucified. He's crucified for you, and he's crucified with me, taking our sin, what we deserved, and he didn't. He takes that for us as our wrath is relinquished on him. And then he dies. But he doesn't stay dead. And because of what he did on the cross, he invites us into relationship with him, with the Father. And not just to do life with the Father, but Jesus actually gives us some special instructions. And he says, not only are we going to do life together, not only is there a God that's with you, but now there's going to be a God that is in you. And so when you face the struggles of life, when you've got an estranged son or the loss of a child or the loss of a marriage, or you face things that you feel like you're up against it, you're looking for hope, you're looking for healing, you're looking for answers, you're looking for just something real, Jesus says, I am in you. This is my spirit, and my spirit is in you. And we get to do life together. This is good news. Let's pray together. God, thank you for the good news story of the gospel. Thank you that no matter how many times we turn away and turn our back, you keep pursuing us. You keep looking for us, like the heart of the prodigal son in the story where the father just can't wait for his son to come home, that you just want us to come home. God, you see us right where we're at. You see us, and God, some of us might feel like they're here to check off a box, say, yeah, I went to church on Easter. But God, you're calling us home. You're calling us into right relationship with you, face-to-face, intimate relationship with our Creator. And God, there's some of us in the room, and those of you in the room, you can hear my voice. I want you to now make this your own voice, to say, God, I choose you. I choose to put my trust and my faith in you, and I don't have to have all the answers for all the rest of the Bible, but Jesus crucified and rose again. I put my trust and my faith in that you could be the Lord and leader of my life, because never before in history has a man done what you did. And so I choose you today. I choose to put my trust and my faith in you. Would you lead me? Would you guide me? And God, some of us here, we are looking for hope. We're looking for peace. We're looking for answers. God, be in us, guide us, lead us in all things. That you would be the confidence we need, the strength we need, the peace that we need as you rest and reside in us. That your Spirit leads us. So God, we surrender our hearts to you. And God, there's some of us in the room that's just like, yeah, I've done that before. But God, right now, we just want to say, God, I want to follow you. I want the way that you lived and taught us to live and love, I want that to become part of my life and my everyday. God, I want to pursue you the way that you pursued me when I was turning away from you. So we choose you today as a church collectively on Easter Sunday, symbolically representing what you did a couple thousand years ago. You rose to new life. God, give us new life today as we choose to follow you. In Jesus' name.